Yeah.
Welcome to How to Address Sea Level Rise and Coastal Flooding in Urban Projects. To make the most of this Zoom meeting, please listen carefully to the following instructions. So that everyone can identify you, please make sure that your name is entered in the following format: country or organisation, name, surname. To change it, click on the participants icon. Next to your name, click on More and then Rename. Please pay attention to your microphone and video setting during the meeting. Keep your mic on mute unless the moderator gives you the floor to ask a question. If you have problems with your internet connection, turn your camera off. To help you follow the meeting, we offer live interpretation in 3 languages: English, French, and Arabic. Click on the interpretation icon, then select your preferred language. To access this feature, please exit Zoom and download the updated version. During the meeting, talks will be alternated with discussion sessions. If you have a question or comment, click on the chat icon and a window will open where you can type it in. It will be addressed during the discussion. Attendees can also share their thoughts vocally during the discussion. To do so, click on Reactions and then Raise Hand. The moderator will be notified, and when you are called on by name, a window will open asking you to unmute your microphone. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the meeting.
Welcome everyone to this workshop of the UFM Thematic Working Group on Urban Regeneration on how to address sea level rise and coastal flooding in urban projects. Currently at the UFM, we are finalizing the UFM Action Plan on Strategic Urban Development and the assessment of climate risks and how to introduce them and how to address them in urban policies and projects is one of the issues to be tackled by member states and UFM public authorities, and that's why we organized this workshop. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Victoria Jimenez. I'm head of sector for urban development at the Union for the Mediterranean. And let's directly start this meeting by giving the floor to Ayşe Asya. Ayşe is Deputy Secretary General for Transport and Urban Development at the Union for the Mediterranean, and she will be giving the welcoming address. Ayşe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Victoria. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Union for the Mediterranean today. This is a very interesting and exciting event for us because we are trying to figure out how to factor in this aspect into our urban portfolio. And we have been working on it for quite some time now. Well, let me first give you what we have as instruments in the Mediterranean to tackle this issue. First of all, there is a 2002 recommendation within the EU on integrated coastal zone management. And also under the Barcelona Convention, there is a protocol on this issue as well, which dates back to 2008. And since then, what have we done? In 2017, the Union for the Mediterranean adopted its first ever urban agenda. And thereafter, we have launched a 2-year-long consultative process on how to put this agenda into practice. This was a science-led, multi-stakeholder, iterative process. And we had the Delft University of Technology leading the process from a scientific point of view. And at the end of the process, which culminated in December, last December, we have finalized the 2 action plans. One, the Strategic Urban Development Action Plan, and as its integral part, the Housing Action Plan will be published soon. These 2 action plans were written and devised by the 2 Delft academic team. We have Professor Carola Hein today with us, who is a member of this team, who will be moderating our panel discussion. Well, what else did we do since then? We also had an event on 19th of May this year, and Professor Rahel Alterman from Technion shared with us a very interesting research on the legal aspects of integrated coastal zone management, and a comparative research between the countries. So it gives us a tool to build upon. And this portfolio, the urban portfolio, is part of the integration process in the Euro-Mediterranean region. And the first ever progress report on regional integration in the Mediterranean was launched on 27th of May. So this is the overall context. Meanwhile, last year in November, the Mediterranean experts on climate change, environmental and climate change in the Mediterranean have launched their first report on the risks in the Mediterranean due to climate change. So we have a lot of instruments to build our work on. So today I look forward to our discussion and the inputs of Dr. Shipra from UN Habitat, Professor Wolfgang Kramer from MEDEC, and also the case studies from Copenhagen and Alexandria, Professor Ashraf Kamal, and afterwards the panel discussion to be moderated by Professor Hein. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisha. Let's start then. The first presentation will be given by Shipra Narangsuri. Shipra is chief at the Urban Practices branch of the Global Solutions Division of UN Habitat, and she will be referring to why cities need to think, plan, and build differently to combat climate threats. So, Shipra, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Victoria. It's a pleasure to be here and join forces with the Union for the Mediterranean in this very important conversation. And thank you again, Aisha, for inviting us to partner with you in organizing today's event. Let me start with a bit of an overview, just a bit of a scene setting, a global scene setting, I must admit, not focusing only on the Mediterranean, but really an overview of the global challenge on climate change, and in particular sea level rise and urban flooding. And then I'll move on to how UN Habitat addresses some of these challenges with specific examples from our work, and conclude with some strategies, recommendations, and our normative guidance, our overall normative guidance that that supports our work. I assume you can all see my presentation. Otherwise, somebody would have raised a red flag by now. Okay, so very quickly on sea level rise and the global impact of sea level rise. As you can imagine, this is the reports that have come out. This is from recent reports that have come out. These are the cities that are projected to receive at least a half a meter of sea level rise by 2050. We know that as many as 630 million people could be displaced due to sea level rise globally by that year. And it's not just displacement, it's also significant coastal and seafloor erosion, loss of land, damage of infrastructure, loss of coastal capital, and increased expenditure in coastal reconstruction, protection, and recovery. And of course, the human migration dimension is integrated with all of this. If there's greater floods, if there's soil erosion, people can't grow their foods, their livelihoods are insecure, water tables are rising, they're going to move to other parts of the world. And this is very likely to lead to a large mobility pattern, a growing mobility pattern from coastal cities to others in the coming 20 to 30 years. Now, the flood level projections are equally serious. In coastal North African cities, a 1 to 2 degree increase in temperature could lead to sea level rise, exposing up to 25 million residents to flooding on a regular basis. By 2070, almost all of the top 10 exposure to flood risk category, all top 10 cities which have exposure to flooding risk will be in the developing world. And the financial impact of this is huge. The human impact of all of this is huge. It's not just about the floodplain expanding, it's also about water stress. And again, all of those different parameters that we discussed just now. Disproportionately, this affects the urban poor. Obviously, we have seen in our cities and human settlements that the informal settlements, the settlements of the urban poor, crowded housing is often located in low-lying areas, is located in areas which are prone to repeated flooding. It's located in areas which are prone to sea level rise. These are not people with a lot of choice. It's also poor quality housing, no drainage, no insurance for their homes and their possessions and their assets, transport infrastructure when it's damaged by flooding and sea level rise prevents people from commuting to work, especially the workers in the informal sector, leading to loss of livelihoods. Increased flooding also, of course, contaminates water supplies and leads to waterborne diseases. And again, we talk about food security, health security, all of those dimensions. Who are the people most affected by this? It's the people who are living in informal settlements, living in overcrowded housing, the urban poor. UN Habitat has started developing a range of adaptation strategies for coastal areas and for riverine flooding, dealing with and particularly dealing with coastal areas and sea level rise. Of course, there is possibilities of putting up marine defenses like seawalls, but there's also the whole dimension of avoiding development in hazard areas, avoiding development in areas that are vulnerable to storm surges and sea level rise. And additionally, using nature-based solutions like mangrove forests, which can protect the shoreline, provide a natural defense, but also then providing not just adaptation, but also mitigation benefits. Let me take a couple of quick examples, a few quick examples, scaling from the neighborhood scale, a public space scale, to on almost a subnational or national policy scale, to share with you what others are doing in this area of planning better for sea level rise and flooding. This is an example from Madagascar, a small town, Manakara, which is 37,000 people, the beach very strongly affected by climate change. This is where our work on public space and creating a parkway along the public beach, developing it into a recreational space, but then also bringing in the community, transforming an abandoned space on the beach, which allows, also for accommodating any rises or any storm surges, which is a very, very good example on a neighborhood scale. On a city scale, this is an example from the Philippines, where, as you can see, there is a whole range of options, a whole range of policy elements, a whole range of design features that are being integrated into the planning for Ormoc city in the Philippines. This is a project funded by ICI, the International Climate Initiative by the German government, called Building Climate Resiliency Through Urban Plans and Design. And it aims to support the Philippines government and the local governments in improving policies, regulations, and capacities. So it's not really about only urban planning and design as in physical interventions. It's really the whole institutional architecture around it that needs to change, that needs to apply a different lens, different rules, different regulations, if you are to deal with, if you are to plan in a climate responsive fashion. Of course, it's not just about planning. And we must remember that planning and design can only provide so much of the solution, but a lot of it is about infrastructure. A lot of it is about waste management. A lot of the waste that finds itself in our water bodies actually blocks natural and man-made drainage channels and leads to flooding. So I think it's not, we have to remember that solid waste management, the work that we are doing around solid waste, around proper waste disposal, around using proper options, around marine litter, management. These are some of the major activities that we're doing around the world in support of the planning and design solutions as well. And then there are larger scale solutions that we're coming up with. These are examples from Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, where we have a major adaptation fund program coming up, which focuses on resilience building at the community level, land use planning, as well as I said before, looking at the institutional legal frameworks to change the approach entirely. We've also worked at the national and the city level on climate adaptation policies in the Solomon Islands. As you can imagine, small island states like the Solomon Islands in the Pacific are some of the most vulnerable to climate change. So we've developed the Resilience and Climate Action Plan for the capital, Honiara. And we also have a national urban policy. So it's both the multi-level governance of this is an extremely important agenda. And closer to home, of course, our partners have developed the urban agenda for the Basque country, for you in the Mediterranean, where one of the goals is resilience of the natural environment and management of the coastal areas in a better way. And there's been a diagnosis within the Bulsa to 2050 regarding the effect of climate change on the coast, and a lot of the guidelines and standards for planning action are expected to be developed on this basis. Finally, UN Habitat has a new flagship called Resilient Informal Settlements for the Urban Poor, Resilient Settlements for the Urban Poor, Rise Up, which is targeting 100 small and medium-sized cities in 50-odd countries and investments around resilient settlements, both at the coast, but also prone to riverine flooding, inland riverine flooding. I don't want to leave it all only with the stories of challenges. So a little bit on opportunities as well. We know that coastal cities are faced with challenges of climate impact, rapid growth, limited capacities, resource base, rapidly growing populations, tourism, poor wastewater and solid waste management. But there are also huge opportunities to revive them, re-dynamize them, to reinvigorate their economies. The green-blue economy work that's going on, the blue economy work, green-blue networks, ecotourism, biodiversity, ecosystem-based adaptation are all opportunities that are very much prevalent in coastal cities. So I hope today's discussion will also look at not just challenges, but also opportunities for coastal development. Finally, what are the big strategies and recommendations from you and Habitat's experience and our work on the ground? First, scenarios. We don't just plan for today. We have to plan for sea level rise and tomorrow's floods. The 1 in 100-year flood is now becoming a 1 in 10-year flood. The 1 in 10-year flood is now becoming an annual feature. We really need to plan much more for tomorrow's sea level rise and tomorrow's flooding levels today. That's the first. The second, we have to account for uncertainty. We have to be very transparent about the risks that we can project and the risks that we can't. And that is the basis for adaptive management. Participatory approaches are key. If stakeholders are not engaged in these processes, the best scientific knowledge has to be combined with stakeholder engagement and validation, and solutions have to be co-designed. Otherwise, we know that they don't work. We also know that they don't protect the interests of the most vulnerable if they are not co-designed. Then it's not just at, as I said just now, it's not just at the city scale or the urban scale that we can address everything. The subnational policies, the regional policies, and national policies, national adaptation plans have to be integrating these into issues around adaptation and getting cities ready. And of course, nature-based solutions are absolutely fundamental. You can only get so far with mechanical solutions, high-tech, scientific mechanical solutions, but really nature-based solutions are fundamental and are lead to many multiple co-benefits. I'm going to leave this presentation with the team so they can share it, but these are some of the tools that we have which guide our work and we hope can be useful to you in guiding your work as well as you take it forward in the Mediterranean region. Thank you very much. That's all from me. This is how you stay in touch with us, and we're more than happy to continue this partnership, as I said, Victoria and Aisha, with the UFM to take this discussion to a much more pragmatic and a much more policy-oriented level. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Shipra. Yes, we are looking forward to exploring how to continue working with you. Let me pass now to the following presentation. Our next speaker is Wolfgang Kramer from the Mediterranean Institute for Terrestrial and Marine Biodiversity and Ecology. And he will be giving us a presentation with a slightly different approach, much more scientific, on which are the risks that and why that the Mediterranean will be experiencing. So, Wolfgang, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Victoria. Can you all hear me? I hope.
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. So yes, just thank you very much also for the opportunity to introduce briefly MEDEC in this context and for the nice words in the opening. We are, as you know, a network of about 600 scientists who have agreed to come together on a voluntary basis, coordinated by the Union for the Mediterranean and the Plan Bleu, to provide a scientific assessment of risks associated with not just climate change, but also environmental change. So this topic of today is very close to our interests, and I want to speak about it from the perspective of risks, of course, challenges, and just to connect to the previous speaker, I want to mention that, of course, these are also opportunities. In fact, coastal infrastructure, but urban infrastructure in the south is is going to be built at large scale to accompany the large population increase. So indeed, there's plenty of opportunities there. But I will speak only about risk today. Can I have the next slide? So this is our report, but it has gone online in the final typeset version just recently and is now being printed as well, about 600 pages. I don't want to spend more time speaking about the report in particular, but if I again can have the next slide. Sea level rise is, of course, a reality today already in the Mediterranean and also elsewhere. These are the old dikes in the Camargue region, which are now being opened in order to have a more natural dynamic of the coastline again, which is basically a positive thing, but also marks the end of some specific land use systems, urban and non-urban systems around the Mediterranean. Next slide. This is the curve that we produced, not actually for the report, but for something that is under preparation right now, in preparation for the sixth assessment report of the IPCC. These are the latest in the graph. These are the latest estimates of optimistic and I would say realistic pathways of climate change and the corresponding impact these have on Mediterranean sea levels. It's of course clear that as long as the Strait of Gibraltar exists, there is a connection, a direct connection between the world's oceans and Mediterranean sea level, and we need to recognize that despite local dynamics, various local dynamics, both due to weather and also due to geology, this global forcing of sea level will be by far the dominant factor. In the Mediterranean, the observations show us that we have throughout the 20th century, we have already had a sea level rise by about 1.3 millimeters per year, and it's now been recently estimated to be 3.7, and this number is actually even increasing. So we talk about an accelerating risk. The estimates now, where will we be, right? Where will we be at the end of the 21st century? The best estimate that MEDEC authors could do about a year ago when we closed the report was to be somewhere between 37 and 90 centimeters above 2000, so on top of what we've already had. This is a large range, but it's explained by the graph. You know, it depends on the actual climate policies that we meet around the world, and there's a statement there with a small probability to be above 110 centimeters, and that's something we need to come back to. There's also other work connected with us and by Gonnery Le Crozanet and Rémy Tiblement, who say that we, even for the kind of standard case, we need to open that gap a little bit wider to even those 110 centimeters. The really big question that we have about all this is what happens in Antarctica, and the forthcoming IPCC report will be much more clear about that than previous reports. It is essentially a situation where we have a low probability of a massively higher level of sea level rise. Could I have the next slide, by the way? And this is something. Even though we will, next slide, even though we will not see this as a highly likely scenario, we will have to be concerned with it. We have to be concerned with it for large regions where people live in non-urban settings, like here in the Nile Delta, but essentially in all estuaries around the Mediterranean. But it will also concern the cities. Next slide, please. I thought there was one on the longer term. No, it's not here. So this is already the Venice case, but let me be clear about about this high risk of a low probability event, you know, of the destabilization of Antarctica. That is a situation that could bring us way above 1 meter by the end of the 21st century. And what is more important, what is even more important, is that it will lock us into a long-term trend that is not to be discounted today just because it's more than 80 years away. We are essentially locking ourselves into a trend of multiple meters of sea level rise within the next few centuries. And I, sorry to be insisting about the city of Venice here, but we are proud of the heritage of 600 years of urban development and cultural history in the city of Venice. So I think we have all moral and ethical obligations to consider also the sea level situation for the forthcoming 600 years, not just this present century. And the real problem with sea level rise is, of course, that even in the case of achieving the Paris Agreement goals, which look very unlikely at the moment, of a massive reduction of emissions, we may stabilize the climate, but we will, after a certain point of no return in Antarctica and Greenland, we will not be able to stabilize sea level rise. Next slide. Now, my colleague Piero Nionello has just recently completed a study. He's also a key member of the MEDIC team. This is again, this is for Venice, but the same sort of analysis could be done for other urban settlements around the Mediterranean. The blue line that you see is essentially the mean sea level line observed during the 20th century up to now. You could say in the Tyrrhenian Sea, and the black line is what is actually observed in Venice. And the difference between the two is, of course, subsidence. Is that Venice, like other coastal settings around the Mediterranean, is subsiding into the deeper sediments. So what is actually experienced in terms of sea level rise is already significantly above what you would expect from if we would just be looking at mean sea level. And then the red line is the North Atlantic sea level rise, which is also in line with the blue one, of course. And then the bars are the frequency of floods and the flood events in Venice. We've all heard about that. They become more frequent, more longer, and also higher. So that is the situation. And if we look at the next slide, you can see what this means. There's, of course, an adaptation program or a protection program in place in Venice to protect the city by actually closing the lagoon during the periods of high water. Now the red and blue line that you see on the right-hand side are the same that you've seen in an earlier slide. They're like the high and low estimates of sea level rise for the Mediterranean, depending on climate policies. There's also a high end line, which is the case for the Antarctic destabilization. Again, not a situation that we can easily rule out. And the blue horizontal levels, they give you the period during which the protection system for Venice will need to be deployed. In other words, there's a situation towards the end of the century where basically the lagoon will have to be closed between 2 or 6 months each year or more, with all the associated risks for biodiversity and general inconvenience for traffic and everything. Not a situation that is ecologically sustainable for the lagoon or for the city of Venice, and of course with a big risk towards the end of the century already that the system will not be powerful enough to actually protect the city or the nearby rural areas. This is the situation for Venice. The same calculations can be made for Alexandria. I suppose we will hear about Alexandria in a moment, about other coastal cities. Essentially, we're moving towards a situation where managed retreat will be the only option, and it's not an option that I would like to consider. So while we talk about better urban planning and better adaptation and coastal protection, we cannot let our policymakers get away from the need to be substantially more ambitious in terms of climate change mitigation efforts. There is no way we can protect urban settlement in the Mediterranean basin with the current engagement of policymakers around the Mediterranean. That is what I wanted to say. I think there was a last slide. Can we have the next slide? Yes. Well, this is about the storms, but we can stop at that point and rather enter into the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang, for this inspiring conclusion. And let's pass now to the following presentation, which is the first case study that will be presented today. That is the case of Copenhagen in Denmark. And the speaker representing Copenhagen is Lieke Leonardsen from the city of Copenhagen. Lieke, the floor is yours. Okay.
I'm here and
over to you.
I'll start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, not in full mode.
No, I'm going into
full screen now. Yes.
Yes, good. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak here. And I'll talk about Copenhagen. And if there's some noise in the background, it's because I'm working from home and somebody is redecorating the apartment above me. So I apologize for that in advance. I'll be talking about storm surge planning in Copenhagen. Copenhagen is located by the sea, and in many ways, the Baltic Sea region is more or less the same challenges that you are facing in the Mediterranean. So my agenda today will be to talk about sort of what are the challenges, what happens during storm surges in the Baltic, and what happens and how are we working to protect the city for these different types of events. We started working many years ago about climate change adaptation in Copenhagen and very quickly identified two main risk factors for the city. One being an increase in rainfall, which is the most immediate threat. We've had experiences with that in the past years. But over the years, sea level rise will be an even greater risk with greater economic damages for the city. And here you can see sort of a model of the impact of, on the left-hand side, a heavy rainfall, and on the right-hand side, the effects of a storm surge. Copenhagen is a relatively low-lying city, but we are sort of relatively well protected against sort of general sea level rise, at least when it stays below 1.5 meters. We don't have a lot of tide in the city of Copenhagen, so that's not an issue either. So our main risk will be from storms that will be pushing water into the Baltic Sea. And there are sort of two main risks. The one is when there's a storm from the north that will press water into the Baltic Sea, which is on the map on sort of the, the lower right corner is sort of the beginning of the Baltic Sea. That's one risk. That's not the biggest risk. Then you have a storm from the southeast pushing water out of the Baltic. But the really dangerous things happens when these two things actually sort of combine or follow each other very closely. So if you have a storm that pushes enormous amounts of water into the Baltic Sea, and then and then the wind change and go to southeast and pushes water back out, that's when you have the really difficult situations in the city. And sort of modeling can show this is a storm surge from the south in the present days, and this is how it will look in about 100 years on the right hand side. But and we have historical data that that shows us that we've had experiences of storm surges in the city that with a sea level rise means that we can actually be hit by storm surges of around almost 3 meters, which will be devastating for the city. So we just decided to create a storm surge management plan, and it was politically adopted by the City Council in 2017. The main strategy for the city is to create an outer protection scheme, and that was based on a cost-benefit analysis looking at what would it actually cost, business cases, what would it cost also to create an inner protection, protecting the quays and the various small islands in the harbor of Copenhagen. And in that respect, I'm not comparing us to Venice, but we also have a lot of historical value in the city center, and having the access to the harbor has always been really important. So closing that off sort of by working on an internal scale would be really not what we wanted. So it's that's why we selected to have an outer protection scheme in the city. The protection level that we're looking for is actually 1,000-year storm surge in 2100. And then sort of, as you can see on the map on your right, in the north, we have the northern protection, and in the south, the sort of the southern protection. And I'll go through what we are trying to do in these various areas. Most advanced at the moment is the protection from the north, where the whole idea is to create an artificial island, which will actually, apparently, they're currently deciding on it in the parliament, the national parliament, because it has to be a national legislation to construct such a big island in Copenhagen. And it is expected that they'll have the final vote on it on this Friday. So if they do, and if they agree, which everything looks like, it will start, the first construction work can actually start at the very end of this year. And the artificial island will also have a possibility for more urban development, and it will work also to be a soil deposit. When we are building in Copenhagen, soil has to be deposited somewhere, because basically everything is regarded as polluted soil. So this will form the basis of the island. And then we will have at some stage to add a floodgate that can be closed in case of a storm surge from the north. And the idea of creating this artificial island is not really that strange. The historical fortification of Copenhagen is very much built up as building an outer ring protecting the inner city. You can actually still see it at the map here. You can see sort of the remnants of the fortification system, and it's basically building on that sort of idea. And a lot of what you see on the Copenhagen map is actually landfill. I mean, it's filled up from soil when they were constructing the city, building harbor area, and so on. There'll be, on the artificial island, there will be a coastal landscape on the eastern side of the island, and then they will have a blue space around the fortress in the middle of the harbor, and that's also because of environmental concerns, trying to protect nature values, eelgrass meadows, and so on. So it's really going to change the city significantly here. But as I said, it sort of builds on the traditional way of having. I mean, we have the old harbor with the fortified rims around it. We have the industrial part. We have at the moment a very recreative use. And then here also we want to add the nature-based climate-proof rim on the eastern side of the island. And the idea of having these nature-based solution is that it's a much more flexible way of doing things, where you can actually allow for for the coastline to move inward as climate change will affect the city, but still having the possibility for a widespread recreative use of the parts of the island. And here you can see the green coastal landscape. And one of the reasons why it's also designed with all these little things going out in the harbor, it's also because there's a lot of current in the sound between Denmark and Sweden. And so you need, in order to avoid coastal erosion, you need to build up these smaller lagoon-like and bay-like areas in order to make sure that it's possible to actually save the coast and not having it eroded. And this is a visualization of how the coastal landscape will look, probably not for many, many, many years, but it's still, the idea is that a lot of the development out there should be natural, so that it will not be sort of a man-made landscape, even though it's man-made, but it's, yeah. So, and what are the challenges for such an island? There are lots of challenges. You want to have 35,000 new residents, and there's a lot of discussions about how are these people going to get to the islands? Are they going? I mean, there's a discussion about building a new coastal ring road under an underground ring road. Metro is extremely expensive. And then there's the question of water quality in the Copenhagen harbor. We can go swimming in the Copenhagen harbor, and that's a major part of living in the city, to be able to do that at the moment. And we want to make sure that we can still do that if we don't have the same flow of water. Environmental issues, I mean, how will this impact the flow of water in the sound? Because basically there's just a few holes, and a lot of the water in the Baltic Sea is actually brackish due to a lot of rivers having their outlets into the into the Baltic Sea, and very little exchange of water, so it's brackish. So will this actually have a negative effect? We need to remove a lot of polluted soil from the ground in order to start building the area, and that's also an issue where, and we also have to transport all the soil from building sites around the city and the greater Copenhagen region. And that's going to create a lot of heavy transport through the city. And then, sort of to finish it off, we might have to move a wastewater treatment plant, which is going to cost around 2 billion euros extra. So there's a lot of questions still, even though we have been starting to go ahead. So that was the northern part. At the southern part, we are doing it a little bit slower. But it's actually where we have the biggest risk. But we have to work with 4 other municipalities in order to find the right solution. Our estimates have shown that damages can reach about 4.5 billion euro for just one event, and can have an impact on the city for quite a number of years. So we have been looking at flood mapping and looking at the scale. How much can we expect? We have been looking to calculate socioeconomic consequences, and also looking for potential solutions. And starting with the solutions, we can build. We can decide on having a very technical solution, or we can decide on having more nature-based solutions. We can have dikes with floodgates, or we can have smaller islands and a gate in the south. And the extra challenge that we have here is that all of this coastal area in the south is actually Natura 2000 area, so it's protected by European Union nature regulations, making it also much more difficult to decide on a solution. But at the moment, we are looking very much towards a nature-based solution, because we also think that's our only possibility to actually get a permission for a project. So we want to have a protection level in the future of 5 meters plus height of the waves. We have a number of infrastructure companies that have a zero tolerance for storm surges and flooding, where we are saying a 1,000-year event is our protection level. They want a 2,000-year protection. That's what we're looking for at the moment. And as I said, this is an area with special environmental protection, which is really also makes it difficult. I mean, we have decided that looking also at sort of the socioeconomic calculations, saying, is it really worth to establish a southern protection scheme? And the answer here is yes, it is. The benefits of establishing a southern protection is much greater than the cost. So there's a positive economy, also because, I mean, it's estimated that construction will cost less than 100 million euros. And as I said, one big event in itself can cost up to 4.5 billion euros. So there's a great difference there. So we have been looking in our socioeconomic analysis, a lot of the physical damages that can happen, the operating losses. I mean, the metro could be down for 2 years after a flood. We have road users, if roads are being blocked because of being flooded. We have an airport in the area. So there are lots of other things that can actually have great economic consequences in case of a flood that needs to be taken into the calculations when you're looking at it. So and then there's I mean, for people living in the area, the physical damages, the rehousing, I mean, also the risk of becoming ill, and operating losses for companies and so on. So there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration here, which is why we are going ahead. And now we are entering a stage where we are looking at around a protection, which when we involve all the other municipalities will cost around 200 to 400 million euros all in all, but it will involve 5 municipalities along the coast designing a system that will actually protect all 5 municipalities. Also a warning sign saying many cities will not be able to do this on their own. They will have to partner up with neighboring administrative units in order to figure out how to solve problems. So the next step is that we are working now with the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Environment, and looking at how we can have some solutions based on nature-based solutions, and also looking at on how do we actually divide the cost between all the different stakeholders that are involved in this work. So there's a long way to go until we start building in the south. But let's hope we can finally get to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Like. And thank you for raising these interesting aspects of supramunicipality or environmental issues that, well, let's see if we can address later in the discussion time. Let's pass now to the case study from the south, which will be the case of Alexandria. And in this case, we will be having 2 presentations. The first one addressing more the climate changes in the north coast of Egypt, and the second one explaining how the master plan of Alexandria and different studies and initiatives deal with the risk. So the first speaker will be Ashraf Kamal, professor at the Housing and Building National Research Center in Egypt. So Professor.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to join this unique group of colleagues. Unfortunately, my camera is switched off. I don't know how to fix it right now, but I hope my screen is shared and you can hear my voice.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly and we can see the screen.
Okay, the first part of the presentation will be comprising a lots of effort that I have done personally since 2006, when I first introduced a comprehensive study on the impact of sea level rise on the lands affiliated to the new urban communities authority. It's a quite strange setup for institutionalizing the jurisdictions of the land, but this is the situation which I will explore in a minute. One moment. Can you see now? Is it changed?
If we can see you, you mean?
Yes, you can.
Not now, but I think that a few seconds away, a few seconds ago, yes.
Can you see now?
No.
That said,
Just we can see the
other
of the
participants are sharing.
No, the presentation that we are seeing is your presentation.
Okay.
Yes, the presentation is right. We cannot see you. We cannot see your image of your
Yes,
face.
the camera is switched off, but
okay, then you can proceed because we can see the presentation.
Okay, now oh, somebody else is presenting.
Yes. Do you prefer to?
I prefer to use my presentation.
Okay.
Is it possible?
Okay.
That's
yes.
why.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We thought that you prefer us to. Okay.
No,
no problem.
I prefer. I added some modifications. Can you see my presentation right now?
Yes.
Okay. That's it. So basically, I will speak about two issues, and my colleagues from Alexandria Governorate will speak about the impact on the strategic plan. But first of all, as per the study made by the World Bank on 2002 and 2008, that the Mediterranean region will be highly affected by 20% more of the temperature increase rather than other regions of the world. As you may see, that the climate change will be affecting the whole region due to flash flood, sea level rise. And we have some anticipation, which I produced myself since over 15 years, that sea level rise may vary between three main scenarios. The first scenario, which is the most optimistic, it's between 7 and 36 centimeter high by the year 2050, and from 9 to 69 centimeters by the year 2080, and the least and the most worst situation by 30 to 80 centimeters by the year 2010 and 100. It's not the situation like this, but the most impact will be on the vertical movement, the topography, the climatology of the waves, the shore currents, and the storm frequencies. The most affected and vulnerable area is, as per the presentation I saw from the Netherlands, is the Nile Delta. The Nile Delta is the most vulnerable zone, and here are some forecasts between the year 2002 and 2050 that the shore coast will be slowly and will be vanished, and it will be affecting the urban areas, the major four cities on the coast: Port Said, Damietta, Rosetta, and Alexandria itself. in case of the rise of the sea level by 50 centimeters or 0.15 meter and 1 meter, almost 12% or 12.5% of the fertile agricultural land will be vanished, which is equivalent to something like 400,000 hectares of the very fertile land in Egypt. These are the maps are clearly defined. This is the current situation, and this is in the year 2030. This is the line that the shore will look like, and in 20 years more, it will be something like this. So big parts of Alexandria here and Rosetta and Damietta and Port Said here will be affected. The impact of the shoreline is highly affected by sometimes dust storm, as you know, that the spring storms coming from the southwest, affecting also the coastal zone of Egypt. It will mainly affecting the agriculture productivity and the stability and sustainability of the urban settlements. The shallow shelf will be also affected by a speed of 1 meter per second, and which is a high frequency that can affect the man-made waterways, the irrigation, the transportation. It could be trapped and depleted by the Nile Delta. Impact on the shoreline will be quite extremely harmful. Although there are some treatments since on the period of 83 to 1995 of only 100 meter length, but it's not sufficient enough to come up with the facts. The very severe impact is on the agriculture, which is the whole incremental impact of storm surge on agriculture area will be almost tripled to the level of 326% of the current estimation, that almost between 212 and 900 square kilometers will be intensified by storm surge, and the impact on the coastal zone will be almost double. So the corrosion and the vanishing of the whole shore will be almost double, from 7.4% to 13.6%. Although we have high demand on water for the agricultural production, not only agriculture, but agriculture and agro-industry production revealed from this. On the demand for urban purposes, population, this is quite severe action. And on the urban areas, we have an anticipation between 5% to 10%, with an escalation from 1 meter to 5 meter sea level rise impact. As I said before, that the four main cities that will be highly affected is Alexandria, Port Said, and Rosetta and Damietta, which are on the fringes of the River Nile. Last but not least, this is such an impact of the image to the right. It's about the shoreline of Alexandria, to the eastern part of Alexandria, which is, as you see, it's a normal day in the winter, and you can see that there are still, the barriers are broken down, although they are heavily constructed, but they cannot sustain the impact of the sea level rise. But the very dramatic issue is that this unique landmark of the Biblioteca Alexandrina is really affected, because here is the shoreline. It's just crossing the street, and this will be in a great endanger situation. I will stop here and give the floor to my colleagues from Alexandria Center of GBP to present the impact on the strategic plan of Alexandria. Then we can come to the conclusion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashraf. Yes, now if Shaima El Sayed, Mahmoud Salem,
Yes, are you listening?
Okay,
are you
here?
me?
Yes,
we
we hear you. Yes, the floor is
okay,
yours.
I will share the screen from here, if you don't mind. Hello, everybody. This is Shaima El Said from General Organization for Physical Planning from Egypt. Today, me and my colleague Marwa Ahmed, today we are presenting an example for how to address environmental hazard on urban planning project. And our case study is Alexandria Strategic Urban Plan 2032. The presentation will take less than 10 minutes, reviewing and discussing GOPP rule, intro about Alexandria City, case study, environmental recommendation of Alexandria Strategic Urban Plan. First, I would like to introduce GOPP, the General Organization for Physical Planning. It's the national Egyptian authority responsible for the planning process that follows Ministry of Housing. GOPP is responsible for preparing, monitoring, and supervising regional and strategic urban planning, coordinating with local authorities and the stakeholders. Alexandria is the city where the study is taking place. Alexandria considered as one of the oldest cities in the world and one of the most important cities on the Mediterranean Sea, playing a central role in regional commercial activities. Lately, Alexandria faced a lot of environmental hazard, as Dr. Ashraf showed, and that was taken under consideration in Alexandria Strategic Urban Plan 2032. Our case study, excuse me, I have a problem in voice. Our case study, Strategic Urban Plan for Alexandria City 2032. The planning process involved international and Egyptian experts such as ES&P, the German company for urban planning, Ernst & Young for local economy and development, EcoConserve for environmental planning. The project is conceived as three-phase planning and consulting project with participation of UNDP and the Alexandria Governorate. The project has an environmental study that discusses the environmental hazard and present some solution for it and recommendation. The project consists of three phases. The first phase, strategic urban development vision, and we call it current situation. And in this phase, we address problems. The second phase is strategic plan and the master plan for 3 pioneer projects. The third is working plan for implementation. Environmental hazard according to Alexandria SUB. Geotechnical stability, waves, storm and tsunami, water pollution, air pollution, coastal erosion, and sea level rise. And we will focus on coastal erosion and sea level rise. The map is showing a scenario for high risk area in the city that will highly affected by the climate change. This map is prepared by in a risk assessment study by Arab Academy for Science and Technology and the World Bank. Result and recommendation of the environmental sector in brief, addressing environmental hazard in achieving Alexandria Strategic Urban Plan 2032 in goals. The study aims to solve problems through main 5 goals. Each goal contains many directives as explained later. Our goals is first goal, support deconstruction, decentralization, and that will be by locating urban growth on safe and stable land and developing climate adaptation urban centers. Second goal, improving quality of life and environmental quality, and this will be achieved by improving access to green space and reducing water pollution, reducing air pollution, and build a green belt around the urban areas. The third one is stimulate successful social economic development by reducing water consumption, mitigation against sea level rise, protect food resource. The fourth one is promoting culture and architecture heritage by protecting Alexandria shore. The final goal is supporting planning policies for implementation. This will be by incorporating environmental risking into special planning, enforce environmental regulation, expand environmental monitoring, raising public awareness of environmental risks. In the next two slides, I will focus in two of the mitigation measures in details. The first one, the studies suggested two mitigation measures for the existing and the extension areas, which will be more applicable in the extension areas. The first one is green corridors, as shown in the diagrams. The first diagram is showing green corridors, which will contain utilities, sports, and the club. And this map is an example for integration between green corridors in detailed urban plan. This is Hayy al-Muntaza in Alexandria. This diagram showing corridors that will collect storm water between residential building in planet lower level corridor to help collecting the water and reuse it in other ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaima. And now perhaps I will directly give the floor to Professor Carola Hein from TU Delft so that she could do a kind of wrap up and launch the discussion. Carola?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks to all our speakers for their excellent interventions and presentations. As Victoria said, I would like to do a wrap up and maybe also add a few points before then turning questions back to everyone. So what I heard is also that we, and just as a reminder, we really expect multifaceted challenges. And we've heard our speakers talk about economic, political, social, transnational, spatial at all levels challenges. We've heard you say that we need strong policy responses, that some of them are already occurring, that we need community-based collaborative solutions. And I would actually also add new imaginaries, as New Zealand shifted from GDP as a counting measure to happiness, for example, and we need new planning paradigms. And I would like to say a few more words on that, giving you a few illustrations from the Netherlands or from Northern Europe. And in the end, I would argue that we need also adaptive strategies so that we really think how we replan in time, over time. So what happens in the day, but also what happens different seasons and what happens at different times of in regard to the weather patterns. So when we think, for example, about the North Sea, and there was recently a conference on the Euro Delta, you usually get these kinds of maps. What is missing is often the aspect of the sea. So one of the calls that I would also like to launch back to our speakers is how can we visualize sea and land together and start with the sea? We just had the question of whether sea level rise will be the same all through the Mediterranean. And what does that mean for all the very different cities alongside it? So what we need really is a city, a plan that integrates maritime and land-based planning. And that is important. So here, for example, in the Netherlands, where you have the big gate that can close off the river into the sea, because the port wants the access to the water, the sea doesn't, the city doesn't necessarily. So a colleague here in Delft, Han Meyer, Professor Emeritus, has been launching a call for treating the Rhine Maus as a smart hydraulic system, which is based on the idea that we need to get away from growth, bigger, faster, to one that includes nature-based solutions. And that's something we have already heard quite a bit about today too. And these nature-based solutions, in my opinion, both deal with the coast and with the rivers and deltas, also as we've seen in Alexandria. So if you want to take a look further in the Netherlands, there are quite a number of solutions on the river, on the Rhine River. For example, the city of Nijmegen is transforming in various ways, creating what the Dutch famously call room for the river. Now, this room for the river project includes a number of urban interventions and designs. And I think that's a dimension that we didn't yet touch upon as extensively in terms of how do we actually physically design that. And there it might be nice to look briefly at the case of Hamburg and the Hafen City development. So the Hafen City in Hamburg is actually outside the dikes. So what has been done in that area is to transform a former port area, but to add an entire layer of flood defenses to it and to design these. So you see, for example, the Sahadi Promenade here, where you design these systems so that they become attractive and that the city is not just looking against a big wall. And that means picking up often historic models like the Wharf, and the Wharf as a kind of island in the sea, where also we heard quite a bit about waste infrastructure. Infrastructures are embedded in these systems that are layered. And then in case of a flooding like here, well, the car level is underwater. Big gates close the level of the shops, etc. There's actually one restaurant where you can then be sitting and watching the water from underneath, but you have all kinds of bridges at the upper height that if all of this gets flooded, people can still escape. So in that sense, to come back to what I said in the beginning, I think we need to consider coastal and port city planning at a three-dimensional scale. Among other things, the Hafen City Hamburg is now developing a vertical cruise ship terminal. And to do that in a way so that we can also include it in the UFM action plan, and to see, as Shipra also mentioned, what opportunities do we have? Certainly we have to try and defend ourselves, avoid more climate change to happen, but we need strong policies for that. But I also think that it's an opportunity for designers to go back to this issue and actually start thinking about nature-based solutions that can help us go into the future. And so, like the case in Alexandria, where you are already thinking on an urban level, let's also bring the architectural level, the smaller scale level into this to see how can we build on a more three-dimensional level with a time horizon and time changes over these seasons towards a longer term future. So develop adaptive strategies. Now, maybe Shipra, if I may invite you back, and you have shown us already a couple of really intriguing examples from around the world with community building. But what I think we see around the Mediterranean is very different types of cities and coastal areas. The northern coast with rivers looks very different from the southern coasts. So I'm wondering what your recommendation from your experience are, particularly for the Mediterranean region.
Thank you very much, Carola. And really, this has been a fascinating set of presentations for us to also learn from. We haven't worked too much around the Mediterranean, as I was showing from my examples. They were from many other parts of the world, but I think 2-3 things come to mind. One is one is the importance of a multi-level, and not a multi-tiered, but a multi-scalar, multi-level approach to addressing the issue of coastal adaptation. I think that's absolutely fundamental. So scaling it up from a neighborhood to a city to a region and then to a subnational policy level. Of course, communities need to be involved at the lowest level, but obviously that's never going to be enough. unless you have policy solutions, unless you have serious financial solutions, also, and serious financial commitments being made by different levels of government into adaptation solutions. So for me, I think what we're seeing is that a range of scales have to be looked at together. A range of governance skills also have, planning skills and governance skills have to be looked at together if you're going to do anything in the Mediterranean. And of course, both upstream and downstream solutions have to be looked at together. We were talking about waste, we were talking about infrastructure, we were talking about drainage. I mean, a lot of these issues are upstream issues and cause flooding downstream. So, you really have to work on a much more regional scale. That's my first and probably my foremost observation here. And then the combination of planning, policy, and infrastructure and finance, those four things together. That's really, any one of those four components on its own is not going to work.
And I think that's a very good point, planning, policy, governance, bringing it all together. Where is science in there? And I think maybe Wolfgang Kramer may actually have a response to that, because it sounds to me that we need a better bridge to bring these scientific messages to the policymakers and to the general public, perhaps to the students. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this.
Well, thank you, Carola, for playing the ball in my way. I think we are really torn between two aspects of the discussion. One is the engineering and how to make sure that we do everything to provide resilient development under the given, say, paradigm of societal economics, of our economy, essentially. The problem is, and it's not an alarmist view of somebody, it's actually the view expressed by the IPCC 1.5 degrees report, is that if we do not enter a more substantial transformation of our society and our economy, we will not solve the problem to a degree that will make those coastal protection and urban development projects work. In other words, if, for example, the assumption in the Mediterranean basin is that we will continue to have the amount of shipping that we have for both commercial and for tourist perspectives, reasons, and also indeed the tourism, the world mass tourism point itself, basing our economy essentially on the assumption that many airplanes every day will fly into the region, we will lock ourselves into an economic model that will not protect our coasts in the future, because it will be based on an emissions-based economic growth paradigm that we will have to escape from. And again, I'm insisting it's not a green kind of dreamist attitude. It's the point that many people chose to overlook in the IPCC 1.5 degrees report, that will be made more powerful in the forthcoming report, that we will have to change our emission paradigms. And if we do that, then I think all these ideas on more resilient urban development will still need to be developed further. But I think the door is wide open for policymakers to use the knowledge that already exists and to develop it further. But without the transformation, we are not getting anywhere.
Shipra wanted to respond to you.
I wanted to come back because I completely agree with you, Wolfgang. I think we need to find solutions that address both mitigation and adaptation at the same time. We can't do one after the other. We can't wait. We can't, of course, keeping emission levels to keeping the temperature rise to under 1.5 is fundamental. But even a 0.5, even a 0.75 requires adaptation. So which are those solutions we can find which can do both? I mean, when you look at compact city models, when you look at proximate economies, you look at the pandemic, post-pandemic recovery strategies that are being suggested, there should be a conscious effort to have strategies that combine both. because I completely agree. Green is not a greenwash. Green is really has to be at the heart of it, which is both cutting emissions, but also adapting through nature-based solutions. That's part of the green recovery model that we're talking about.
Well, if I can just briefly come back, Shilpa, I totally agree, and I think what we heard today from both Alexandria and Copenhagen is very encouraging in that sense. Although I worry about the costs and about the massive physical infrastructures that are put in place, but I think there's a lot of interesting development going on there, and particularly, as I said, I think southern Mediterranean cities have the, if you will, the advantage that much of what will be urban in 2050 is not built urban yet. In other words, the development is still taking place and can be, I wouldn't say easily, but can be driven into a more resilient direction. It is in a way more difficult to protect existing old cities, which exist also in the south. But it's more difficult to do that than to build new cities that are actually both more resilient and also less emitting greenhouse gases.
And I think that is a very nice segue also to Lieke, to ask, well, if you look at the Northern European cities, I can already sort of in my mind hear a lot of people say they are rich, it's easy, they can invest a lot of funds, and so why bring them even up when we're here talking about the Mediterranean? So I'm wondering if you could comment on that from the perspective of Copenhagen, to see, so what is the message? Where do you think that if you were to partner up with cities around the Mediterranean, your experience could be of help?
I mean, first of all, we do actually partner up with lots of cities around the world, both poor and rich cities. I think, I mean, what Wolfgang said about sort of new developments being a place to look at. And I think one of the things that we also, even though we can be seen as a rich, I mean, we also have the challenges of finding the right way of financing things. And I think we can perhaps assist in I mean, some of the building blocks that are needed. We have the resources to develop them, and then we can share them, and it can be translated into a context that, I mean, you cannot just transfer it directly because there's different legislation and so on, but you can actually move them forward to other countries. That's been my experience. And I also think that, I mean, working with going ahead and perhaps being some of the first to do something, we will also be the ones making the mistakes. And we can afford the mistakes much better than you can in other countries. And it's I think that's one of the things that is important in this, is that I mean, when we are struggling with finding a way of making nature-based solutions, we are and environmental protection and all of that at the same time, we are getting some experience that we can hopefully share with other cities around the world and also in the Mediterranean about what has been our experience. And in that way, sort of say, okay, try to avoid doing some of the same mistakes that we've done.
And I think that's a very good point, that we shouldn't only always just share best practices, but we really need to learn from other errors or ways that have gotten off track. I think that's a very, very important point too.
Yeah, I have several times done a workshop on oopses, I mean, where we have been sharing in confidentiality some of the things that have gone really wrong.
That would be nice to spread that a bit further. There was one question in the chat to Chipra, which she also answered, about do we have a GIS-based tool to see sea level rise, which doesn't exist, but I do think it's a really intriguing way of spatializing the discussion, because then it can't stop at national borders. And it's a question, what kind of tools should we actually have? And I think that's another call also back to, well, science and even the spatial sciences, architecture, urban planning. So I'm wondering if our colleagues from Egypt could come back and maybe say a couple of words on your wish list, but before I turn it to you, Wolfgang, did you have a quick response on that?
No, I didn't. I didn't want to speak before my Egyptian colleagues, but I just wanted to draw the attention to two physical aspects that these GIS tools that we see at the global scale do not cover in the Mediterranean, and they're really important for everyone to realize. The first one is subsidence. Is that the subsidence of, as I mentioned, for the Nile Delta and my colleagues too, and for Venice is a really important part of the local impacts of sea level rise. And the second one, which is less obvious, perhaps, is that because of the absence of tides in the Mediterranean, in most of the Mediterranean, settlements and cities are much closer to mean sea level than they are, for example, in Copenhagen or in Amsterdam or Rotterdam. And that is really something that northern people need to recognize, that you are actually used to fluctuations in sea level on the short-term basis, which are much more substantial than anyone in the Mediterranean has ever seen. And therefore, the traditional coastal infrastructure of the Mediterranean is different from the north and is much more sensitive, actually. But I just wanted to put those, and that is also very hard to capture in a standard GIS tool. It's something that you need to bear in mind when you translate the mean sea level changes from some of these tools with the actual risk.
I think that's a very good question to also always keep in mind subsidence, but also the limit between salt and sweet water, which is moving inland, and all the other areas, or the height of bridge over rivers that get more or less water. So over to our Egyptian colleagues. I don't know who wants to take the floor first, and I see a couple of calls already in the chat in terms of what kind of tools are out there. So maybe you have some ideas too, as a call for collaboration, new tools, or initiatives that could start from this point.
If you allow me, Ashraf Kamal from Egypt, I believe, I agree totally on your points that we need to have a kind of a collaborative mitigation solution for this quite severe problem that is facing the Mediterranean. Although the case of the Mediterranean might be different from the North Sea, where Copenhagen and I see myself in the Netherlands when I lived there for quite a while. But, we need to learn a lot from the case of North Sea, and where the flood of I believe it was 1954, something like this, in North Sea, and we will be facing something like this. And I believe we can have a kind of a GIS system or something like this to give the full information for the whole Mediterranean coast, so that we can assess whether it will be impacted or not. I believe I have a question on the chat stating, is it unified, the rise of sea level? No, it's not unified. It depends on the level of the terrain, on the control level, and the sea level. So some parts will be severely harmed, and some parts will be less harmed. Some other parts where we have something like a shelf or a high level of the terrain will not be harmed. But this has to be done on a collaborative way on the whole Mediterranean. And I believe for the idea of having the impact on master planning or strategic planning, yes, this is important, but the most important is also the flavor of the Mediterranean, the architectural character of the Mediterranean, where you have the very small, medium-sized cities all over the Mediterranean. I believe that it was a project funded by the UNESCO in the MOST program, where some cities were selected to see the impact of the sea level on those cities. So I believe it's lots of efforts to be collaborated in a unique, generalized agenda for the benefit of all. That's my point.
Yes, yes, Shibra, before I turn over to Shaima.
Sorry, didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to pick up on the last point, the lots of different elements that need to be combined. I think we do need a mapping of the differential impacts, but we also need tools to assess the socioeconomic impacts in different contexts. Our socioeconomic impacts of sea level rise, of urban flooding, the loss of livelihoods, the loss of food security, the loss of jobs, the economic losses, but also people leaving, mobility, stuff there. So it's a complex modeling effort, I think, that is needed, and complex and very context specific. And I think what at UN Habitat, what we aim to do, and this also a response to the question around tools, is to perhaps start with saying these are the different elements you need to model, rather than providing a modeling tool or a GIS-based assessment tool. I think the first step is to say, what are the elements we need to model? What are the elements we need to consider? And that's coming out very strongly from the Egyptian intervention as well. Thanks.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, because we have to have a sort of slider to assess which factor impacts the other and what happens if we do just one or the other intervention. But maybe Shaima, you wanted to add something. Can't see on my screen right now, but. Is our colleague from Alexandria still there? I know some people had to start moving off to other conversations. Maybe. Okay. Well, let me know if you do want to respond to the last comment. Maybe Victoria, Aisha, you have another question to pose, or to. And also give me an indication of time, because I know that some people already have to leave.
Yes, I think that it will be better to stick to the time so that people can follow with their own agenda. So, well, I would just say that you could wrap up the discussion and see if any other wants to add some final comment, and perhaps we could directly close, and we will see from our side how we can continue from there, perhaps involving the European Space Agency or Copernicus program, and see how, if we can contribute in some way or another to this mapping of risk that it has been put on the table.
Yes, and I think if we unless I see another hand up or urgent question in the chat, I think the conclusion, as Shipra also just put it, we need to be able to map in space, in the concrete locations, the different challenges of sea level rise itself and its associated challenges. So economic transformations, what does it mean for heritage sites? What does it mean for work opportunities? What does it mean for education? What does it mean for port activities? So let's make sure that all the activities are taken into account as we at least imagine this shared tool. And it might be a way, because Wolfgang, I really like the idea of having all these scientists work together. That could also be a model to cross national borders and bring different expertise together to build a comprehensive framework, at least start by asking the right questions for the area of the Mediterranean, which is linked by its shared waters, but still serves very different communities, places, cities, and so on. So I would say I would like to thank all of you very much for this wonderful conversations, wonderful and inspirational talks. And I do hope that we will have a follow-up soon to discuss, as you said, with ESA and others, what the implications are for the Mediterranean. Over to you, Aisha and Victoria, if you want to give a final goodbye note.
Just a question. Is it possible for us to put the video of this meeting to social media?
Yes, we can. From our side, we can do that. I don't know from UN Habitat or the other speakers, but
we're happy to support it. No problem.
fine with me too. And maybe you want to send an email around. And there was also a question to get the webinar from, I think, 19 May online,
Yes.
or share the link.
We'll do it.
We will do that.
Thank you very much indeed for this very fruitful meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to meet all of you.
Thank you. Big thanks from Habitat. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.